Hey guys, Alex Late here from True Mortgages. I'm just going to be doing a quick, probably less than 10-minute video of a very good CIBC article that came out talking about unemployment numbers in relation to what we saw before pre-pandemic versus what we're seeing now, and how people are going on vacation, a lot of absenteeism with sickness related. Really, really good article, so I just want to jump into it. Guys, if you don't know who I am, I'm Alex Lay, a mortgage agent with True Mortgages. We help Canadians with home financing for home purchases, refinances, equity takeouts, debt consolidation. So let's just jump right into it, guys. Alrighty. So like I said, this is an article from CIBC. I find they actually have quite a few good articles that come out right to my inbox, actually. So this one came out today. Very, very good article. It's called In Sickness and in Health, Canada's Labor Market. So you'll see why it's called that in a couple of minutes as we go through, by Andrew Grantham and Kieran Charbonneau. Alrighty, so we'll just quickly go through. Bank of Canada suggested that a rise in the unemployment rate is necessarily a tool to inflation with the tightness in the labor market, a sign of excess demand within the economy. So basically what's saying, the Bank of Canada is wanting unemployment because when they have unemployment, people start to spend less. When they spend less, inflation actually reduces. But what they say here is, however, the current low jobless rate doesn't just reflect the strong demand. It also reflects that fact that a sicker labor force means that a lower or healthier looking unemployment rate is needed to achieve the same level of supply that we enjoyed pre-pandemic. In other words, because the labor force, they could say sicker in this article, but it could be just meaning people also retiring, people going on vacation. But they say sicker, and you'll see that for the reason just in a bit here. What they're saying is that because of all the people that are off on leave, absentees, we'll call them, you then need to bring in more employees to cover those spots. So let's say for every 4 employees, 3 or 4 employees that you have on a leave, you need to bring in another employee to, let's say, fill their one spot if they're all part-time, just an example. So even though, actually, I'll just continue to read, and it actually sort of explains it further here. So in the amount of supply the economy is currently getting from a 5.0% unemployment rate would be similar to what we could achieve from a roughly 6% jobless rate in 2019. Now, that's very significant. So just going back to what I was saying before, in other words, this means that having unemployment at this rate, we're still getting the same amount of supply of employees compared to a 6% unemployment rate in 2019, because less people are off sick, vacation, etc. Okay, so just continue on here. It says the absence of the supply would be inflationary in its own right, possibly even more so than having the lower unemployment rate and higher wage growth. So absolutely, that just means that when you have a lower unemployment rate, that itself is inflationary because there's more demand for workers. Then workers can then demand higher wages. Higher wages lead to more purchasing power. Purchasing power leads to higher inflation, and so on. So let's continue on here. The difference between employment growth and actual labor supply, which we think is better measured by hours worked, is easy to see. While employment is more than 3% higher than it was at the start of the pandemic, working hours are up only by 1 3/4. So that's significant, right? So you have a 3% higher, right here, 3% higher employment rate, but the actual hours worked it doesn't match up with the 3%. How can that be? So essentially, it's because of sickness related. The divergence isn't because we have suddenly become a nation of part-timers, unwilling to take on full-time job. Indeed, average usual hours, or the hours you are contractually supposed to work, have not changed relative to where they stood before. So this means that in terms of the part-time contracts or the full-time contracts or whatever contract you have, the actual requirements of those contracts haven't changed. It's just a matter of it's just a matter of people being off sick more. What has changed is the average hours that people actually work, which is well below its pre-pandemic 2020 mark due to elevated level of absenteeism, which I mentioned earlier. Companies are getting less bang for their buck or fewer hours actually worked per employee. Alrighty, so illness-related absenteeism is inflationary in two ways. First, there's a direct cost for companies in terms of paid sick days. So this is actually a governmental issue, but also, I guess you're just going to call it a labor force risk to corporations. First, government issue, because if the governments are mandating X amount of sick days, then the corporations have to take on that cost, right? So if sick days 1 year is three days that you're allowed to have mandatory sick days, if the government mandates 10 sick days per person for the next year, all of a sudden those 7 extra sick days, the corporation has to eat that cost. And then secondly, the corporation just has inherent risk, the labor risk, like I was saying earlier, due to sick days, because we're humans. So people are going to get sick. They're going to need days off. Things come up that you can't really get around, funerals, sickness, vacation, etc. So it says, for instance, relative to pre-pandemic years, we estimate that wage costs have increased by between 0.5% and 0.9% solely due to paid time for employees that are absent because of family illness or family reasons. So right there, that's what I was just saying, the wage costs increase. These bounds are calculated on different scenarios for the share of employees with paid time. Second, by forcing employees to recruit additional workers to cover for those who are away, it contributes to tightness in the labor market and increases wage pressures. So this second one is really, really important. It goes back to what I was saying earlier about the employees being able to demand higher wages. So what this is saying is that because you now have to recruit additional workers to cover those who are away, all of the companies are looking at the same basket of employees. And so when there's more demand than there is supply, right? 10 companies, let's say, fighting for one employee, just an example, that employee really can decide, oh, I'm going to go with the highest paying company, right? And then the other companies are going to say, well, we'll increase the wage to match that other company. And the cycle goes on and on and on. Alrighty. So just some charts here. Hours worked have lagged GDP and employment post-pandemic, but not because of more part-time work. Okay, this makes sense. Change in average hours. So usual hours, what they have, and then actual hours, what we're seeing. So you can see the craziness from 2022 versus 2017 to 2019. Wage costs have increased due to illness-related paid absenteeism. Let's see if I can get a, that's not what I want to do, but that works as well. Let's see if I can get a way to draw on here. Oh no, it's just waiting stuff out. All right. Anyways, okay. So let's continue. Share of wage bill paid to employees absent due to illness family. So you can see here lower on the lower bound versus the upper bound. In 2017 to 2019, we were about, let's just use the lower bound, for example, 1.25%, 1.5%. 2022, we're almost at 2% there. All right. So just continuing on here. Fortunately, the issue appears to have worsened in 2022 due to the continued circulation of COVID in the community and the resurgence of other issues. More than 0.4%. I do not want to be highlighting everything. More than 0.4 more hours per employee were lost in Q4 2022 compared to the average seen in 2017, 2019. Okay, so that's self-evident. That's an increase from 0.2 extra hours of illness or family-related absenteeism in 2021 relative to the pre-pandemic. In other words, it's just saying that more people are going off due to family and illness related. This is happening at a time that workers, why do I keep highlighting? I don't want to highlight stuff. All right, it's fine. This is the same time that workers are using vacation time to a greater extent than they were during the first 2 years of the pandemic, resulting in an even more noticeable increase in overwork. Okay. On aggregate, the additional hours that are being lost compared to pre-pandemic norms is equivalent to requiring around 175,000 additional staff. So that's really significant. So if let's say you needed 1 million workers 1 year in a sector, now you actually need 1,175,000 workers to do the exact same work as 1 million workers. Crazy. Just an example. Obviously, the ratios are going to be different for 1 million versus 33 million Canadians, but that's just an example. If vacation time was not still running below pre-pandemic norms, lost hours due to sickness and family needs alone would be equivalent to requiring around 230,000. So vacation time is actually running low. What they're saying, it could be a lot higher. So if it were higher, instead of 175, we need about 230. Because of this, the actual supply that the economy is getting from a 5% unemployment rate in terms of working hours is noticeably less than it would be prior to 2020. In fact, this is a really, really interesting sentence. This is what I should actually highlight. In fact, based on the increase in lost hours, we are currently getting the labor supply equivalent to roughly 6% unemployment rate pre-pandemic. That's super, super important. In other words, we have 5% unemployment right now, roughly, right here, 5%. But the workforce or the working conditions, I guess, is equivalent to having a 6% unemployment pre-pandemic. So people are off due to those illness and family related so much that a full percentage of unemployment is equivalent to each other or equals each other. Employees continue to normalize their use of vacation time, but time lost due to illness or family issues doesn't improve. The labor supply could be equivalent to a 6.2. So that's just exacerbating it a little bit there. Alrighty, more staff needed. This shortfall of hours actually being worked can also explain why, even with the level of employment already high in some sectors, vacancy rates are still elevated compared to where they stood before the pandemic. Makes sense. Less basket of employees. Obviously, you're going to have more vacancies in your workplace. Historically, there is a reasonable correlation between lost working hours and the posting of job vacancies. That makes sense. Your lost working hours, you're posting more. On average, if working hours lost due to illness or other factors have risen by the equivalent of 4 employees, then 1 extra job vacancy has been posted. So roughly speaking, every four employees, 1 extra vacancy, 1 extra employee is needed. Based on the prior relationship, the 230,000 extra employee equivalent hours lost due to illness or family matters calculated above would have raised job vacancies by about 60,000. Okay. Moving on, as illness-related absenteeism increased through the fall months, and with that trend likely continued through the winter, this may limit the decline we would expect to see in job vacancy as the economy cools. Okay. Moreover, there's reason to believe that hours lost due to employee sickness may account for an even larger proportion of excess job vacancies in the economy at the moment than the historical relationship would imply. Sectors where work cannot be undertaken at home have been disproportionately affected. So this is really important coming up. Disproportionately impacted by the shortfall of actual working hours, including education, manufacturing, and construction. While education has always seen elevated levels of sickness-related absenteeism, I won't comment on the teachers, just joking, this is a side note. While education has always seen elevated levels of sickness-related absenteeism, that was not the case in areas such as manufacturing, construction, and mining, which have seen the biggest increases relative to pre-pandemic norms. In other words, because these type of industries require people to be on the site, construction, mining, like you can't do work from home, you're actually seeing even more levels of absenteeism, and more, therefore, there's more job vacancies because they need to try to hire more people. But at the same time, you can't hire people that don't exist, right? With our labor force, unfortunately, in Canada, we're going on to immigration a little bit. We're bringing a lot of immigrants, but we're not bringing a lot of construction skilled is more technologically skilled. So anyways, that's for a different video, but just important to note there. All right, in these sectors, historical relationships suggest that one vacancy is posted for the loss of working hours equivalent to 3 rather than 4. So going back 3 rather than 4. So every 3 employees, they need one more employee. This also helps to explain why there's an excess of job vacancies in sectors such as manufacturing, construction, and transportation, even though employment within these areas has already recovered beyond what would be expected given current demand conditions. Right, in health and food accommodation too, the excess in vacancies is much larger than the current shortfall. Labor demand in retail remains lower than its prior relationship with GDP, but that could reflect the fact that there are more sales are still being conducted online, which makes sense. For some sectors, the added paid sick leave is putting significant pressure on wage costs. I talked about this earlier. This is particularly the case for some in-person industries such as mining, oil and gas, utilities, and education, where wage costs are about 1.5% higher due to paid time off for employees absent all week due to illness or family matters. So because of those illness or family matters in those specific industries, wage costs have already went up 1.5%. It's on a corporation bottom line that could really destroy you. It could be the reason you're profitable that year or not profitable. However, it can also impact some industries where telework is prominent, such as public administration, which has seen a wage bill increase by as much as 1% of the same reason. Alrighty, just moving on here. So there's just a couple of charts here. We'll get into them a little bit. You guys can check out the article if you want to see them there. In sickness and in health, the Bank of Canada. So this next section, it arguably is the most important part of the section, next to a few of those sentences I mentioned earlier, because this is actually why it's so important to discuss the unemployment and what's really happening with the unemployment, because the Bank of Canada is going to raise or lower interest rates using this data, right? Lower unemployment means more people are working, more people working means more people making money, more people making money means more spending leads to larger inflation, right? So they actually want to reverse engineer that. They want less people working, so they have less money to spend money. All right, the Bank of Canada should be careful about placing too much emphasis on the unemployment rate as a signpost of excess demand within the economy. Makes sense. The health of the Canadian labor market in the coming year will also be influenced by the evolution of COVID and other respiratory. Okay, that anything could happen there. We're gonna have another pandemic, so I won't comment on that. Should the health situation improve dramatically over the spring, the vacancy rate could come down rapidly and the unemployment rate could increase even if demand doesn't fall. Okay, well, that would be a better pill for some workers. The good news, well, that would be a bitter pill for some workers, meaning people losing their jobs or not being able to get paid as much. The good news would be that we could get the same output with much less inflationary pressure. What I referred to before, pre-pandemic, they had 6% unemployment. Now we have 5%, but they're producing the same amount of work. However, while some improvement on the health front is likely in the cards, when warmer weather returns, COVID could represent a structural shift within the labor market. Cold and flu seasons have always had a significant impact on the labor market year after year, and with COVID, we have added some disease to the list. The good news is that as long as the health situation doesn't deteriorate further, this could represent a one-time level shift in labor costs, since in the coming year, we won't need a further increase in staff to cover a further increase in absenteeism. Okay. As a result, the issue's contribution to year-over-year inflation should be dropping out of the 2023 numbers, helping to achieve part of the necessary deceleration in Canada's CPI. This sentence is really important here. This one actually should highlight. Based on what they've noted here, the year-over-year inflation should be dropping out in 2023, which means that hopefully we can see some interest rates come down a little bit, or at least stabilize, right? Because they were way too low from 2020 until 2022, but now they're significantly higher, probably going to push us into recession and housing market, not collapse, but significant decrease. Watch my other video for that, where I talk about interest rates and inflation in the 80s compared to now. We're sort of seeing a pretty big correlation. Not necessarily a correlation of one, but similar. Along with diminishing inflation impacts from the global factors and non-COVID supply chains, that underlies our view that some of the improvement in inflation will come from factors other than the pain of higher jobless rate. All right. So then they just have some data here. I'm not going to go quickly over the data, but that is important. Guys, if you haven't, if you want to look at this article, I'll put the link in the below. Andrew and Karine, they wrote a great article here, put some great data in. I actually emailed them just to get a little bit of a follow-up and let them know what I thought of their article. Just give you a quick rundown of what I had asked. I had one important question here. So I said, how does mental health being on the rise, whether statistically or on an actual basis, statistically meaning statistically versus actual, what I mean by that is that actual means, is it actually increasing, or statistically does it mean that we're just now catching and recording what was already true before? So anyways, how does mental health being on the rise statistically or on an actual basis affect our unemployment? Should we expect the real hours worked to become even lower with the apparent rise in mental health issues, all else being equal? I ask this because if we continue to see absentees in the workplace from acute events such as a pandemic, I'm wondering what our economy will look like going forward with chronic issues such as mental health. So Karine was gracious enough to respond to me. She said, in fact, the article we consider the increase in illness-related absenteeism, which obviously includes COVID, but it would also include general absenteeism related to mental health. So they actually did answer this question. So in that sense, it is already factored in. But if the mental health situation were to get worse and there were more absences linked to it in the future, then it could add further pressure, which makes sense. In general, what we try to argue is that the divergence between actual hours and usual hours could be persistent, and mental health might be more reason for that, though the impact on inflation are one-off. So basically, she's just reiterating some of her last points there, or here she is reiterating, I should say. But really thankful that that they responded to me there. Great article by them, guys. I'll leave it at that. If you have any questions, comments, definitely don't hesitate to leave a comment down below, or you can email me, alex@empiremortgagegroup.ca. I'll leave the email, and our website is in our link tree. Guys, again, I'm Alex Slate from Triton Tree Mortgages. We do home financing, mortgages, refinances, equity takeout, debt consolidation, you name it, in Hamilton, Ontario. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.